After days of relentless pain that only grew more painful as time passed, Yuan could finally breathe as the pain slowly subsided. However, he was still too exhausted to lift a finger, much less stand up. He closed his eyes and quickly fell asleep. Once he'd fallen asleep, the memories returned. After Tianyong had left Han Zexian's tomb, he went to the nearest city within the desolate continent to sell some of his treasures, as he was completely broke. Besides the longevity pills and herbs he'd acquired from the Outer God's Cavern, Tianyong had several spatial rings filled with treasures from the opponents he'd killed inside Han Zexian's tomb, mainly from Ji Yu Lim and his friends. Since he didn't want to risk attracting the immortal clan's attention, Tianyong opted to pawn the treasures for much cheaper than if he'd sold them at an auction. However, even when sold for cheap, the treasures earned him a lot of money, more than he ever had before, especially from selling Ji Yu Lim's treasures. After selling all of the treasures he deemed useless, Tianyong purchased enough appearance-altering pills to fill an entire spatial ring. Then, he rented a room at a hotel. Once he was alone and in a quiet environment, Tianyong began pondering his next steps. He thought about returning to the Immortal Monastery, but he was now at the peak of the Immortal Ascension realm, a step away from becoming an immortal. Unless he wanted to become the sect leader of the Immortal Monastery, there was no reason for someone at his level to return. Moreover, he'd been absent from the sect for many decades. They most likely considered me dead long ago. There's no point in going back. Even if I went back, I'd only bring my trouble to them. When he thought about returning to the Immortal Monastery, only one thing appeared in his mind. Senior son, I never got to apologize to her. Tianyong sighed, his voice laced with regret. Memories of her flickered through his mind, her unwavering gaze, their weird relationship of disciple and sect elder, and the disappointment he had left behind. He had long since accepted the path he had chosen, but he still regretted it. If he ever returned to the Immortal Monastery, it would only be to apologize to her. Nothing more. Once Tianyong decided that he would not return to the Immortal Monastery, he shifted his focus elsewhere. There was something, someone, that had lingered in his thoughts ever since he entered the Outer God's Cavern. A question that resurfaced every so often, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Once Tianyong decided that he would not return to the Immortal Monastery, he shifted his focus elsewhere. There was something, someone, that had lingered in his thoughts ever since he entered the Outer God's Cavern. A question that resurfaced every so often, gnawing at the edges of his mind. What happened to Cultivation after that day? I hope he's fine. The memory of their last encounter played in his mind. The only thing that somewhat eased Tianyong's worries was the knowledge that Cultivation was the young master of the Immortal Might clan. A clan of such prestige and strength would not let harm befall their heir so easily, not even a fellow immortal clan. And yet, despite this reassurance, an uneasy feeling still lingered in his heart. Cultivation was more than just an acquaintance, he was his savior, his friend, and his sworn brother. That bond could not be ignored. Tianyong owed him more than just fleeting concern. With a deep breath, he made his decision. I need to check on him. However, he did not know where to start. Should he visit the Immortal Might clan, or should he ask around? No, I shouldn't try to contact Cultivation directly, especially when the Immortals clan knows of our connection. I'd only be bringing him trouble by doing that. Another individual suddenly came to mind. What if I asked her? Inside his mind was a beautiful woman, Ren Sha, Cultivation's ex-fiancée. If I recall correctly, Ren Sha belonged to the Immortal Sword clan. Once he had a destination, Tianyong left the hotel and made his way to the Immortal Sword clan, which was on the other side of the world. But first, I'll need to leave the desolate continent. They should have restored the ship's services by now, right? Tianyong made his way to the docks to see if the ship's services were operational. Sometime later, he confirmed that a ship would arrive in 2 weeks. Although Tianyong could easily traverse through the sea by flying at his cultivation, he didn't know the directions and feared he might accidentally encounter the mysterious sea demon that killed Huang Shaoli's family again. Even at the peak of immortal ascension, Tianyong wasn't confident he would be able to defeat that monster. After paying for a spot, Tianyong waited for the ship to show up. 2 weeks later, when the ship finally arrived, Tianyong boarded and began his journey back. A little over a week into the trip, while he was cultivating, a sudden announcement shattered his focus. The voice was urgent, almost desperate. This is an emergency announcement. There is a flying leviathan heading in our direction. If there are any cultivators aboard who can deal with it, please save us. Tianyong opened his eyes as panic erupted around him. The once calm ship was now filled with the sounds of terrified passengers, their screams and frantic shouts echoing through the air. Seriously, what is with my luck? Tianyong sighed out loud. Encountering a leviathan was already rare enough, yet somehow, he had managed to come across 2 flying leviathans, something even rarer, back to back. The absurdity of it all almost made him laugh. He stood up and left his room, making his way toward the deck. His steps were unhurried, his expression calm despite the chaos unfolding around him. When he arrived at the deck, Tianyong turned to look in the direction of the flying leviathan. Although the flying leviathan was still a few hundred miles away, Tianyong wasted no time. Without hesitation, he activated Limitless Sword Domain. A formless yet boundless pressure swept across the sky, and in the next instant, a single sword strike cut through the vast distance like a divine decree. The flying leviathan never had the chance to react. Its colossal body froze mid-flight before splitting apart, its life extinguished without knowing what had transpired. After killing the flying leviathan, Tianyong turned around and calmly made his way back to his room. He neither announced his deed nor lingered to witness the aftermath. Meanwhile, the passengers remained in a state of panic, unaware the threat had already been taken care of. Unbothered by the ongoing commotion, Tianyong simply resumed his cultivation, as if nothing had happened at all. Eventually, the captain's voice echoed through the ship once more, laced with confusion. I don't know how to say this, but it appears the flying leviathan has disappeared. We are safe for now. The announcement did little to calm the passengers, if anything, it only deepened their bewilderment. A flying leviathan was not a creature that simply lost interest or abandoned its prey. Once it had set its sights on something, it pursued it relentlessly until either it or its target was destroyed. Yet, against all logic, the threat had vanished without a trace. The captain's puzzlement was shared by everyone aboard, but Tianyong, still in his room, paid it no mind. Eventually, the ship reached land safely, and the moment it docked, the passengers wasted no time. Rushing to board, their fear had not fully subsided. Even with the captain's reassurance, none of them had truly felt safe until their feet touched solid ground once more. Some murmured among themselves about the mysterious disappearance of the flying leviathan, while others simply counted their blessings and hurried away without looking back. Meanwhile, Tianyong stepped off the ship at his own pace, indifferent to the lingering tension in the air. His focus was already elsewhere, as his journey was far from over. A few days later, Tianyong entered an unassuming building. How can I help you? A fully cloaked individual asked as he sat across from Tianyong inside a dark room. I want to know where I can find Ren Sha from the Immortal Sword Clan, said Tianyong. He had gone to an information broker to ask about Ren Sha's whereabouts. The cloaked individual fell silent, and the atmosphere became awkward. If you're trying to harm the young lady of the Immortal Sword Clan, you can leave now. I won't give you such information even if you kill me, since I will be a dead man the moment I assist you, said the cloaked individual. Tianyong showed the information broker the medallion Ren Sha had given him inside Han Zexian's tomb and assured him, I am not trying to hurt her. However, the information broker wasn't buying it and said, if your medallion is real and you really know Lady Ren, then what are you doing here talking to an information broker? You should be able to contact her by yourself. I've never been to the Immortal Sword Clan, and we're only acquaintances. We barely know each other, but she gave me this medallion after I helped her with something. Tianyong placed 1,000 spirit stones on the table and said, let me change my question. Where can I find the Immortal Sword Clan? Are you serious? Even without seeing his face, Tianyong could tell that the information broker had a look of disbelief on his face right now. Does it look like I am joking? The information broker turned his gaze to the spirit stones on the table and swallowed nervously. After a moment of silence, he spoke, you can find the Immortal Sword Clan at the Sword Blossom City. Since this was public information, the information broker didn't mind revealing it to Tianyong. He only hoped that nothing would happen to Ren Sha in the near future. Tianyong didn't say anything else. Not even a thank you. He stood up and left the next moment. A few months later, after using several teleportation arrays and traveling from city to city, Tianyong finally arrived at Sword Blossom City, a place that lay on the opposite side of the world from where his journey had begun. Once inside the city, it didn't take long for Tianyong to locate the Immortal Sword Clan's residence. It was impossible to miss, as they occupied nearly half of the city. After walking around for a while, Tianyong finally approached one of the guards stationed at one of the many entrances to the Immortal Sword Clan's vast residence. The guard, clad in traditional sword-engraved armor, stood with an imposing stance, his gaze sharp and unwavering. "Excuse me, I am looking for Lady Ren," Tianyong said. "Why are you looking for the young lady? Who are you, and what is your relationship with her?" the guard asked. It was common for young masters from around the world to show up at the Immortal Sword Clan's gates, all seeking an audience with Ren Xia in their relentless attempts to court her. So, the guard instinctively assumed Tianyong was just another one of them. Tianyong retrieved Ren Xia's medallion and said, "I'm an acquaintance of Lady Ren, and I am here to discuss business with her. Unfortunately, this is the most I can share with you." The guard instinctively straightened his back and fixed his demeanor after seeing the medallion. "May I inspect the medallion, esteemed guest?" "Go ahead." Tianyong handed the medallion to him. Although he trusted Ren Xia to a certain extent, he wouldn't be surprised if she had given him a fake medallion to mess with him. However, a few moments later, the guard spoke, "I have confirmed the medallion's authenticity. That said, the young lady is currently not home. If you wish to meet her, you will have to wait for her to return, or you can go find her at the Celestial Sword Sect. If you decide to wait, I can notify the young lady of your arrival. However, I cannot guarantee you that she will return in a timely manner since she is a very busy individual." "The Celestial Sword Sect, right. I will go to her. Thank you." Tianyong gave a slight nod to the guard before turning around and disappearing into the crowd. After Tianyong left the Immortal Sword Clan's residence, the guard notified Ren Xia of the situation in advance through her communication jade slip. "A business partner with my medallion, huh?" Ren Xia was puzzled after receiving this news. Although she had business partners, she couldn't recall giving any of them her medallion. As a matter of fact, she hadn't given out a medallion for the last 50 years. When Ren Xia asked for a description of the man, the guard described Tianyong in his disguise. Naturally, Ren Xia didn't recognize this description and only found the situation more puzzling. "A man with my medallion and claiming to be a business partner, huh? How interesting." Thus, Ren Xia patiently waited for her mysterious business partner at the Celestial Sword Sect. A few weeks later, Tianyong arrived at the Celestial Sword Sect. The Celestial Sword Sect was one of the top sects in the Divine Heavens during the Primordial Era, its prestige and influence rivaling even the 7 Divine Sword Peaks. Like the 7 Divine Sword Peaks, the Celestial Sword Sect specialized in sword cultivation, but their philosophies differed greatly. While the 7 Divine Sword Peaks emphasized raw power, overwhelming force, and unshakable might, the Celestial Sword Sect cultivated a style that was elegant, fluid, and swift, like a blade of light cutting through the heavens. Their techniques were said to be as graceful as flowing water yet as deadly as a falling star, embodying both beauty and lethality in perfect harmony. This elegant and fluid swordsmanship naturally attracted more female sword cultivators. Because of this, the majority of the Celestial Sword Sect's population was female, setting it apart from other top-ranking sects of the Divine Heavens. Though not exclusively a sect for women, it had long been recognized as a haven for female swordmasters, producing some of the most powerful and revered swordswomen in history. Tianyong approached their entrance, which was guarded by 2 female disciples. "I am looking for Lady Ren Xia from the Immortal Sword Clan." Tianyong showed the guards the medallion as he spoke. Since the disciples couldn't determine whether the medallion was real or fake, they had no choice but to notify a sect elder for assistance. Under normal circumstances, the guards would have allowed Tianyong to enter the sect without much issue. However, this situation was different. Ren Xia was the young lady of the Immortal Sword Clan. Because of her exalted status, the Celestial Sword Sect treated her differently, enforcing stricter protocols and ensuring that only those who passed their scrutiny could approach her. A sect elder arrived half an hour later and asked Tianyong a few questions before leaving to contact Ren Xia. "Lady Ren, there is someone who wishes to see you. He has your medallion and claims to be a business partner," the sect elder notified Ren Xia. "Should I bring him to you?" Yes, but bring him to the 7th celestial peak. I'll be waiting for him at the Blossom Garden there, said Ren Sha. I understand. I'll bring him to you immediately. Even sect elders had to act like servants before the presence of the immortal clans. Sometime later, the sect elder led Tianyang to the Blossom Garden in the 7th celestial peak. The Blossom Garden was a tranquil retreat where disciples went to relax and meditate. Nestled atop a large hill, the garden was adorned with a variety of rare and exotic plants, their fragrances blending into the crisp mountain air. At the very peak of the hill, a massive cherry blossom tree stood in full bloom, its delicate pink petals drifting gracefully with the wind, painting the landscape in soft, fleeting beauty. Right beside the cherry blossom tree stood a small pavilion, its elegant structure blending seamlessly with the serene beauty of the garden. Inside, a single table sat at the center, surrounded by jade chairs carved with intricate patterns that reflected the refined aesthetic of the Celestial Sword sect. However, what drew Tianyang's attention the most was that one of the chairs was already occupied. The figure seated there exuded an air of quiet authority, her presence effortlessly commanding the space around them. It had been over 50 years since Tianyang had last seen Ren Sha inside Han Zexian's tomb. Back then, she had already been a beauty, but she had matured into an even more breathtaking presence since then. Her once youthful features had refined, exuding a quiet grace and confidence that only time and experience could forge. Her pink hair fluttered gently in the breeze, catching the soft light of the cherry blossoms, creating a mesmerizing contrast against the serene backdrop of the garden. As she turned her gaze toward the sect elder, her expression remained calm yet commanding. "Thank you." Her voice was smooth and composed, carrying the elegance befitting someone of her status. The sect elder gave a respectful nod, but she made no move to leave. Instead, she remained in place, her presence unwavering. It was clear she had no intention of stepping away. Ren Sha, however, didn't object. She, too, was wary of Tianyang's identity, and allowing the sect elder to stay only reinforced her caution. Turning her gaze back to Tianyang, her sharp eyes studied him from head to toe, a quiet scrutiny that carried both curiosity and suspicion. Finally, she spoke, her voice composed. "I do not have the best memory, so I apologize if this may come across as rude, but could you jog my memory with your name?" There was no hostility in her tone, but neither was there warmth. "I would like to speak in private," Tianyang said as he placed her medallion on the table. Ren Sha instantly confirmed that the medallion was real with a glance, but she still didn't realize Tianyang's true identity. "A name," she repeated in a firm tone. Instead of answering with his name, Tianyang simply spoke the name of a technique. Ethereal Blossom Sword Dance. The moment those words left his lips, Ren Sha's eyes widened in shock and disbelief, and a particular individual appeared in her mind. "Impossible," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment the sect elder noticed Ren Sha's abnormal reaction, her instincts flared. Without hesitation, she moved swiftly to Ren Sha's side, her expression sharp with vigilance. In a single motion, she drew her weapon, the cold gleam of her blade reflecting the gentle light of the cherry blossoms. She leveled the tip of the sword directly at Tianyang, her voice filled with suspicion and authority. "Who are you?" Her stance was unwavering, her aura surging as she prepared for any possible threat. Before Tianyang could even react, Ren Sha swiftly intervened. She reached out and pressed her hand firmly on the sect elder's, forcing the blade to lower. "It's okay," she said, her voice calm but still shaky. "He's nobody suspicious. Can you give us some privacy?" The sect elder's eyes flickered with hesitation. Ren Sha's reaction had been far from normal, and now she was suddenly vouching for this stranger. After a brief moment of tension, the sect elder reluctantly sheathed her sword, though her sharp gaze remained locked onto Tianyang. "As you wish, Lady Ren." With that, she stepped away, though it was clear she wouldn't go far. Now, only Tianyang and Ren Sha remained beneath the cherry blossom tree. Once Ren Sha had full control over her emotions again, she sat back down and spoke, "Is it really you?" Tianyang sat down and calmly responded, 2 weeks. His answer to her question was the exact amount of time it took him to learn the technique. "I see, so it really is you." Ren Sha's voice was soft. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. "How long has it been since then? I thought you would never make it out of that place alive." She had never expected to see him again after learning about his situation with the immortal clans, and yet, here he was. However, Tianyong ignored her question and went straight to the topic. I didn't come here to reminisce. Culas. What happened to him after I entered the mountain? Where is he now? Rensha's body trembled again after being reminded of someone she'd forced herself to forget. Sorry, but I do not know. Do you really expect me to believe that? Tianyong frowned. Why do you expect me to know? Because you're his fiancé. Ex-fiancé. We broke our engagement at the tomb. Did you forget? That doesn't mean anything, nor does it change the fact that your clans are close enough to engage the two of you. There's no way you wouldn't know about his situation. Renshaw let out a quiet sigh, her gaze drifting slightly as if recalling a distant memory. I truly don't know what happened to him, she said, her voice genuine, devoid of pretense. All I know is that he was taken away by the patriarchs of the other immortal clans. I haven't heard from or about him since then. And you never bothered to ask about him. Tianyong frowned. Why would I? Renshaw shrugged, her expression indifferent. Besides our forced engagement, our relationship could barely be considered more than acquaintances. Even now, I couldn't care less about his situation. Tianyong didn't doubt Renshaw's claims. From the way she spoke, from the casual indifference in her tone, he could tell that she truly didn't care about Culas. Even if she were to learn that Culas had died, Tianyong had a feeling that she wouldn't grieve, nor would she feel any sorrow. To her, he was nothing more than a name from the past, a person she had once been tied to by obligation rather than choice. But what is this? Renshaw suddenly said, a hint of amusement creeping into her voice. We haven't seen each other in over half a century, and the first thing you talk about is another person, my ex-fiancé, no less. She leaned slightly forward, her sharp gaze locking onto Tianyong, her expression unreadable, profound, teasing, yet carrying an undertone of something more. Why don't you ask about me? She continued, her tone light yet deliberate. Like how I've been doing, or whether I've found another partner or not. I'm not interested in your affairs, Tianyong coldly responded. However, this only made Renshaw more aggressive. You know, I would occasionally think about you, even though I was confident you were dead or would be soon. I knew you were a special individual, but even I couldn't have anticipated how special you were. How did you escape the tomb? I know the immortal GU clan has that place watched around the clock despite how long it's been. Yet, Tianyong didn't play into her game. His expression remained calm and unwavering as he replied. I'll tell you if you help me acquire information on Culas. Renshaw blinked before a playful smirk appeared on her lips. Leaning back slightly, she crossed her arms in amusement. I don't want to Tilda, she said in a teasing, sing-song tone, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Even the coldest of men would have had their demeanor soften at the sight of Renshaw acting so playfully. Her teasing tone, her mischievous smirk, and the way she carried herself with effortless charm could easily smite any man. Yet, Tianyong only frowned. If I recall correctly, you still owe me a favor for helping you acquire the ethereal blossom sword dance. I am here to claim that debt. After being reminded of her debt to him, Renshaw's playful demeanor vanished. Her expression hardened, the amusement in her eyes fading as she straightened her back, exuding the cold, commanding presence that befitted her status. She stared at him with an icy gaze, her voice devoid of the light-hearted tone she had moments ago. And what are you going to do if I refuse? She challenged, her words sharp and deliberate. Since you don't want to have anything to do with me, I no longer have a reason to keep you around. A pause. Then, her next words carried a thinly veiled threat. Hell, I might